Israel has stepped up its airstrikes on Gaza over the last 48 hours, bombarding the region with attacks on the West Bank and Syria as it vows to intensify its targeted attacks.
Meanwhile, the US is pressurising Israel to delay any ground invasion of Gaza to allow more time to negotiate the release of hostages taken by Hamas more than a fortnight ago. Well, joining us now is Eugene Kontorovich, Director of the Centre for Middle East and International Law at George Mason University. Eugene, thank you for joining us. The US has urged Israel to hold off their invasion so there can be more negotiations over the hostages. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think, sadly, the international community is falling for the clear psychological manipulation by Hamas. Why did Hamas take 200 innocent people as hostages? Specifically to protect it from Israeli attack. And the international community is unfortunately feeding into this, allowing a government which sent people to murder, torture, dismember, and rape 1,500 innocent civilians to go unpunished. And justice must be done and safety must be restored. So Western governments are trying to basically think about their own hostages there. Israel has, 200 Israelis are there, and Israel should not be held back from doing what it needs to do.
Listen, Eugene, really good of you to be on Talk today. And I think from our point of view here and on this side of the coin, it's such a difficult subject to talk about. And it must be incredibly difficult for you there in Israel. Absolutely stand shoulder to shoulder with you. The terrorist atrocities, the genocidal impact of what Hamas did those 12 days ago, whenever it was now, absolutely appalling. And there isn't anybody under international law who wouldn't quite rightly say Israel has an absolute right to go and get its hostages and revenge for that attack. Of course, the humanitarian scale of what's happening in Gaza will be talked about, and quite rightly. What we've heard a lot about militarily over the last week or so, Eugene, is Israel was going to go straight in with that land invasion. Then it seems to be holding back. We're wondering whether there are intense negotiations still going on about hostages or the impact. But this is not going to be easy. And what I'd love is for all the people who scream at the television and go, this isn't fair on Gazans, right? Which is there is a humanitarian issue. What would you say to the people who say Israel should sit down and talk rather than exact revenge, as they undoubtedly will do? What would you say?
Yes, so I would translate what ceasefire really means. Ceasefire means when people come, invade your country, torture your citizens, burn children alive in front of their parents and parents in front of their children, kill 1,500 people, the per capita equivalent of 5 or 6 9/11s. What a country is supposed to do in response is talk to them.
Yeah.
Talk to them, not to eliminate them, not to prevent it from happening ever again, but to talk to them.
And that was the problem with my words, Eugene, if I can jump in. When I say revenge, actually, it is eliminate Hamas so it can never happen again. That's the reality.
And that's not revenge. Right, that's not revenge.
No.
That's deterrence.
Yep.
Right. There is no revenge for this. But what I would say is, of course, war harms. Is bad for civilians. It's horrible for Israeli civilians. 300,000 innocent Israeli civilians who have never voted, none of them, for a genocidal government, have been displaced and are now refugees inside of Israel. World War II was bad for innocent Germans. It was bad for innocent Japanese. The war in Afghanistan was bad for innocent Afghans. So, of course, there's a humanitarian price. But if a humanitarian price prevents a defensive, justified war, that means evil and genocide can reign untouched.
And of course, there hasn't been an election there. No one has voted for over 17 years for Hamas, and the majority, 50% of the population are under 19, so wouldn't have voted anyway. But what are your fears, Eugene, of a wider conflict in the Middle East as a result of whatever action Israel takes next?
A wider conflict would not be a result of any action Israel takes. A wider conflict would be a result of Iran having decided on a wider conflict. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza are both Iranian puppets. They are just two hands of the Iranian octopus. And we see now Iran is having its Houthis allies in Yemen shoot missiles at Israel. Iran has begun a war of encirclement against the Jewish state. We have been warning for years that when the Ayatollah Khamenei says genocide of the Jews, says wipe Israel off the map, he means it. And now they're starting to do it. So really the only question is the international community going to hold Israel back and tie its hands from the genocide that is now at its doorstep?
What do you, as an Israeli, what does your countrymen and women think that the international community can, or should do, I should say? I mean, last week we saw Biden arrived, Sunak arrived. What do the Israeli people want from the international community, Eugene?
Israelis don't want anything from the international community. They want to be allowed to protect themselves. We're not asking for help. We're not asking for soldiers. We're not asking. What we're asking for is treat us like any other country that this would happen to. Joe Biden came and said, "Oh, you guys should learn from our mistakes in Afghanistan and Iraq. Let us learn from our own mistakes, please." And indeed, what was the American mistake? Should we learn from Joe Biden's mistake in Afghanistan to leave the territory and have it taken over again by terrorists? Israel, in order to survive, must ensure that an attack like this can never happen again on its territory. And for that, the international community needs to essentially stop interfering and stop being seduced by Hamas's psychological warfare. Maybe they'll release a hostage. Maybe they won't escalate. But we have seen who they are. They haven't changed. They're not going to change.